Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. This is your host, Dr. FM, and we are delighted that you have joined us today. And this indeed is another day. Oftentimes we take life for granted. We wake up in the morning and we start doing what we need to do and start running around, but we should never take life for granted at all. Life is a gift from God, and we take every day as a real gift from God. So we're delighted that you have joined us today on Today's Africa. Today's Africa is an opportunity to have healthy, informative, and brave conversations on topics pertaining to Africa. As many people might not be aware of it, Africa is not a country, it is a continent. So we have a lot of things to talk about from within 53, 54 different countries in Africa. And we are united as a continent. And even though we have some of our brothers and sisters who are in other parts of the world, they are still part of this continent. So we have Africans, and I really mean that. Africans, and then we have African people of African descent who would be around the world, around the globe. And so we are one. And then we have friends of Africa, people who have taken an interest in Africa, not to take advantage of Africa, but to learn what is happening in Africa so that we can contribute to better life for those on the continent and for those outside and everyone else globally. So in a moment, we will be welcoming our guest today. And of course, we encourage you, our listeners and our viewers, to subscribe, to like and share this channel. Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio is live with various programs and various music genres as well. And so feel free to check us out, lovebay.com, Love Bay Afrobeat Music, the radio, and you will be able to subscribe so that you can be part of our team. And of course, this is your host, Dr. FM, Francis Mpindu Manangi, and we are delighted that you've joined us. Today, we're going to be talking about the value of storytelling in Africa. This is a very, very special topic. Many of the history of Africa has not been recorded. Maybe I shouldn't say many. Much of it has been recorded and some has not. But we find these expressions of history of the continent of Africa told in stories or through stories. And so stories have a very, very special part in what Africa is about. And so we are delighted today to have an author who also happens to be a nurse and who happens to be, of course, a storyteller and someone who also has a talk radio. And so we should be bringing her in a few moments. And by the way, feel free to interact with us. Feel free to send in an email via Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and of course, StreamYard, which we use to share stories about Africa and all that pertains to the various topics that we have here on Today's Africa. So I'm delighted that you have made time to be with us, and I'm I'm sure that you have other fish to fry, but you decided to join us today. And for that, we are very, very grateful. And of course, we meet right here. Today's Africa on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for today's Africa. And I trust that you are having a great day, a great morning, a great afternoon, wherever you are, and just waiting for our host. Well, I am the host, waiting for our guest to come in, and I see that she is going to be joining us just now, and there she is. Welcome. We were just trying to wait patiently and saying she is on the way. So thank you for being with us. You know what? I was hoping that we would have connected much earlier so that at least I know how to say your name. One of the things I don't want to do is to try to call you names by butchering your name. So please let me know, how do I say your name?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you for being with us today. We appreciate that. So how do I say your name?
Let's try with you saying it first.
You are brave. I guess this is brave conversations. You are brave. Okay.
Most definitely.
So the attempt that I made, I said, I wonder whether there is an emphasis in the middle name there. Is it part of the name or that's just a middle name? So I was like, Yaa Yeboaa. But then I'm like, maybe I need to make sure that that middle one is put in there. And then I'm like, okay, how do I sound, how do I say it without sounding like I don't know how to call it? So I was like, Yaa Yeboaa. Looks like she's frozen for a little bit there. Can you hear me? Sounds like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties there. We should be able to correct that. Our brother Theo works hard in the background to make sure that we are on the same page, in the same library, and the same book. So again, this is today's Africa, live on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. This is your host, Dr. FM, Francis Monangi Mpindu, and we're delighted that you have joined us. Our sister came in briefly. She's having difficulties logging in, but we hope that that should be corrected shortly so that we are able to enter into this conversation. We're just talking about how I should say her name. I hoped that she would have joined us a little earlier so that we could visit a little bit. But sometimes our guests are not able to do that. Names are very, very special. And the last thing you want to do is to call someone names by not asking them, how do I say your name? I think it's a sign of respect when we do that. And I think it's inappropriate when someone says, well, I can't say that. Can I call you this? I think that is not a good way to socialize with people. You could probably ask the person, is there another way you would want me to call you so that I'm not saying, okay, because I can't pronounce your name, I can't say your name, then is it okay if I call you this? No, it should be to the other person to say, okay, I guess if you can't say that, you can call me this. Anyway, sounds like she's back. Our sister is back, so I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if she heard me. Did you hear my attempt to say your name? Because you gave me the permission to say your name.
Yes, I did.
Okay. What did you think of my attempts to call
Just give me 1 second.
Sounds like the line is choppy. It's breaking up.
It is. For some reason, I don't know why.
Okay, now I heard that sentence loud and clear.
I'm
So,
not sure the reason why.
okay, you're coming out loud and
Can you
clear
hear
now.
me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I do apologize for all this kerfuffle. I'm not sure the reason why all my technological stuff is giving me so many issues this morning, which is quite challenging. But all the same, we will get it done.
Okay, yes, we're looking forward to that. And thank you for joining us. We're delighted that you have made time to be with us today. So I attempted to say your name, but I didn't get your response in terms of how well I did. You gave me the permission to do that. I was actually telling our viewers and listeners that if you cannot say somebody's name, you should not go ahead and say, is it okay if I call you this? No, it's not up to you to say, I can call you this. It's up to the other person. You might say, okay, I'm having a hard time saying your name. Is there another way you would want me to call you? Instead of you imposing what you want about their name, because names are very special. And I like to believe that these three names or words put in front of us here have profound meaning. So you might even start by just letting us know, what does your name mean? And how do I say it? How do we pronounce it?
Yes. So when you pronounced it the first time, when I gave you permission to pronounce it, you pronounced it correctly.
Okay.
Nana Yaa Yeboaa.
So it's
You
Nana
pronounced it
Yaa.
correctly. And
Okay.
if Yeboaa.
Yeboaa. Okay.
So
Yeboaa.
that is right. And with many of us from the continent of Africa or around the world, I should say, names have meaning, and we name according to an event or something that is occurring in a family or in society or in a country. So yes, you did ask me, what is my name? What is in a name? So the Nana is a title, and Nana across the world is used very much. In certain places, it's the title of a chieftaincy, queen mother, or king, which is within our Akan traditional namings as well. It can be a grandmother, a grandfather, and or it can just be a name of or it can just be a name that has been given to you. I was named specifically after my grandmother, Nana Yaa Yeboaa. But I am Yaa Yeboaa. Yaa meaning that the day I was born, was a Thursday. So that is my day name. And then the Yeboaa is helper or preko. The appellation that comes with the name is helper or preko. Preko is a person that stands and does things at once. So that is the long short of my name, Nana Yaa Yeboaa.
Nana Yaa Yeboaa. Thank you for
Yes.
such an explanation. That's quite a loaded meaning. I like to believe that you're taking and keeping up to your name by being helpful, someone who is there to help. And so when we hear the name Nana Yaa Yeboaa, who is she? I understand. I'm aware that you are an author. I'm sure you'll be able to tell us some of the things that you've written. You are a nurse, and you even have a talk show as well. You are the host of
Yes, I do.
a radio talk show. Okay, so who is Nana Yaa Yeboaa?
You summarized who part of what I do. So, yes, I host the Yaa Yeboaa podcast. It's a video podcast on YouTube and whatnot. I'm also a registered nurse by profession and an author as well. I do believe my life purpose, for instance, as part of the core whom or my sole direction of what I was brought on this earth to do, which sums up who I am, is to share my experiences, my knowledge, and with people, not only Black people, but with human beings, all races across the board. And that is why I do what I do, because it's part of my sole purpose to do that.
You know, when we live a purpose-driven life, it really is inspiring and it's
Mhm.
inspirational. And I am very, very encouraged to hear that. We are going to get into the storytelling, something I know that you are very, very good at. And we're going to be talking about the value of storytelling in Africa. And of course, this is your host, Dr. FM, Francis Mpindu Munangi. We're delighted that you have joined us today. We do broadcast in over 140 different countries around the world. And so we do have listeners this morning, this afternoon, this evening, globally. And so we are just delighted that you are here with us. So what are some of the things you have written? We will get into the storytelling. What are some of the things you have written? You're an author. What have you written? Someone told me that when people write a book,
So
they are addressing something. So let us know why the books and what did you write on?
I started my writing career, for instance, as a poet. When I came to Canada, I used to do a lot of spoken word poetry. So I was always on stage. So out of that is when I did my first book came out, Lamentations by the Banks of the Volta, and then my second book is Roots of a Woman, and it looked at my experiences as an African woman trying to root myself and understanding the reason why I am on this earth, and how to navigate some of these challenges, etc. The writing for me is telling a story, but it's also an avenue for me to unload, unpack all these and share these experiences. So that is one aspect of my writing. There's another side of writing that it's not in print form, but it's on Smashword and whatnot. That is the what I call the floozy ones, which is more of romantic and whatnot, short stories, short stories. And I do oral storytelling, Anansi stories as well. So I do have some children's book on Anansi stories, why the lizard bobs its head, and why how the world got Anansi stories, etc. So that's what I do.
Excellent. And we really are looking forward to hearing some of those stories. Um, so maybe if you've already identified one of them, go right ahead and bring us in. Bring us in into one of the stories that you have written. I'm glad to hear that you have quite a diverse approach, romantic writing, just writing for everybody, and children's stories. That is wonderful. So share with us one of the stories that you have.
So where do I start from? Um, So, for instance, I'm not sure whether we do have the time for me to share with you at length, for instance, an Anansi story, because that's a full production. But what I can do is um, quickly read some poetry to you.
Yes,
Quickly.
yes.
Oh my goodness. So, well, I thought I was going to be at the tail end of the conversation, but okay. So in my book, Roots of a Woman, I'm going to share with your audience one of the poems, Politics of Old African Men. And then I'll give you the story behind the reason why I wrote this poem. Is that okay for you?
Certainly. We are all ears.
Okay. Thank you. The politics of old African men. The politics of old African men decrepit as the colonies they inhabit, trapped in a world gone by. They like peacocks flamboyant in their suits, with ties suffocating their necks. Who am I? A loud woman with piercing arrows for words and fire for breath. The arrogance of old African men, laughing stock of the colonized world, chickens with short plumes, craving the bombast of the majestic cockerel, imagining legacies that amount to nothingness. The impudent for a woman to lead. So I watched her gathering her sleeping children and stormed out of the consort of old African men who skirted around problems and talk of today, while yesterday's issues us.
Wow.
I used to be very involved in community work in the GTA area. And I found myself almost always to be the only female voice then in a room of men. And at that time, my children were little. So everywhere I went with them. At one particular meeting, I think there were maybe about 20 men and my one myself and another lady there, and I had my children with me. We were discussing community issues and finding strategies to resolve some of their issues and implement programs. But during the conversation, I realized that the men were butting heads and, for lack of a better word, trying to figure out who's got a bigger balls. And the solution was right in front of us, which, from my perspective, so I realized that their politics is so individualistic in the name of society, but it's not going to go anywhere. So I said that I gave my piece, I claimed the floor, gave my piece, gathered my children, and got out of it. And that is what birthed this poem, The Politics of Old African Men.
Hmm. Thank you very much for sharing that story. That is quite amazing that from that experience you were able to put that into writing as you reflected beyond what you had participated in. I was just amused by your reference to ties, or ties suffocating their necks, and I'm like, that is a very, very interesting way of describing what a necktie is. And I think quite often, like you've pointed out, the aftermath of colonialism is something that oftentimes we do not pay attention to, and we should. And
Yeah.
because it's so subtle, oftentimes we don't realize how much it actually plays into what we do and how we do things. And so that is wonderful. I would you know what, I have to uh, I'll make an arrangement to get my own copy of the Roots of a Woman.
Roots of a Woman.
It sounds like a very, very loaded kind of book that we need to promote and encourage others to reflect on. Now, is that all most of the stories, or is it different topics within that
So
book?
I delve on different topics in the book, which are how do you call it? So I look at womanhood, and then the politics, and then also contemplation. So part of it is how do we call it? Contemplation of how do we call, yeah, of life. So
Okay.
say page 92. So part of the complete contemplation of life, for instance, um a cry of peace. A woman sits in front of a hut, ruminating quietly on days long gone. Surrounded by kinsfolk, today she shakes her head, looking at the corpse scattered. She tries to breathe, but dead stench chokes her. Her heart knows no peace. In the darkness of the night, she is crazed to the depths, igniting her soul, illuminating the many pleadings of her plight. She cries for injustice and peace, for the abandoned children of the East. Her tears flows with ease south to the shores of her chest. Drip, drip, drip. Pain that breeds diseases of death and misery. When will justice ever pay a visit to console her dire longings for victory? Her heart cries for the righteousness of the concord. War has widowed her. War has rendered her barren, though she has borne many children. The last night, she, in pieces, was laid to rest. Her voice still pleads from the vast beyond for the cries of children left behind and the soldiers stripped from her breast. So that is a cry for peace.
Hmm. Wow. Thank you very much for sharing that. This is today's Africa. We're delighted to have Nana Yeboaa, who is a writer, a storyteller, a nurse, and someone who is actively involved in her community and, as we can tell, around the world through the various expressions that she uses, the social media, the writing, and even the host of the program via YouTube. And so we are just delighted that we have someone like you with us today. And to those of you who are joining us, we're glad that you have joined us as we talk about the value of storytelling in Africa. Now, what comes to mind when I mean, I know this is a loaded question because I'm listening to
Mhm.
you and I'm thinking something must have happened to you to be able to enter into this realm of storytelling and writing poems and and all that. So maybe before we get into the value of storytelling,
Okay.
what is it that brought you into this realm, into this world of storytelling and writing and expressing yourself in this way. I mean, you just talked about cry for peace, and I'm like, wow. We need in Africa women to be actively involved in peace resolutions, and unfortunately, in most parts of our continent, the women are not in the forefront. We know that things are changing, and some of our countries are starting to realize the value of women in peacemaking and peacekeeping and all that. But what brought you into this realm of writing and these powerful reflections?
My journey into writing, I think, is highly influenced by my mother. Her She had a love for reading. So I used to read a lot, and I still do read a lot. Actually, part of my library is set up. It's not fully set up. I changed my thing, so you can see all the books here. But I do really love reading. One thing that stood out for me that really changed the direct trajectory of my writing and my presentations and storytelling, etc., is when I immigrated to Canada. When I immigrated to Canada, I was already doing my writing, and I was invited at U of T around 1999 to be on stage to share one of my poems. And that appears in my first collection, Lamentations by the Banks of the Volta. And the poem was actually about, well, it was about the African man, once again, a marriage to a foolish African man. But when I finished, that poem, I was asked whether I was going to continue that writing. And I said yes. But somewhere down the line, I fell off because, life happened. What really pushed me also was that the poetry gave me a voice to air out my frustration. And
Oh, it sounds like she has frozen. We are live here on Today's Africa. And we know that our sister seems to be having some technical difficulties here and there, but we hope that she'll be able to reconnect. We're just delighted to be talking about the value of storytelling in Africa with Nana Yaa Yeboaa, who is an author, storyteller, a nurse, and someone with who also hosts a radio talk show in her name, talking about some of her reflections as well. So we're delighted that she is with us today, and hopefully she'll be able to reconnect. This is someone who has a passion for expressing lessons and educational pieces within our communities, our children, relationships, and even politics. She mentioned earlier about how she looks at neckties, the ties suffocating their necks. She's talking about men. And I said, wow, that's quite an interesting way of looking at neckties. But we do have perspectives that ought to be incorporated as we do life together. I'm aware that things have changed and continue to change within our continent of Africa as far as doing things together, men and women, boys and girls, because together we accomplish more. And she mentioned again the time when she had to walk away from something because she realized, even though this was supposed to be a community resolution opportunity in terms of what was happening in the community, she realized that the focus from the men who were there was taking away from what really needed to be addressed. And I realized that oftentimes, we get to meetings, and instead of focusing on what needs to be done, it's very easy to put in our egos in there and try to see who is who and sizing up each other, which is not really necessary. It's not even wise at all. But I'm not too sure what really happened or the dynamics that led to that. But I think we can do better. And I think one of those solutions is just to make sure that we have meetings that are well planned by people who know how to negotiate and facilitate meetings. I've been to meetings where people ended up just saying what they were thinking, which did not necessarily contribute to what needed to be said within a context. So anyway, that's just something that came to my mind there in terms of her contribution in that environment. But we are really delighted to have Nana Yaa Yeboaa, who is an author, a nurse, and a host of a radio talk show as well. She attributes her passion for what she does to her mother, who influenced her to love reading. And it is encouraging to know that mothers play a very, very important role. I know that I'm a product of that. Moms teach us a lot, and even in my own family, when I hear my wife saying to our daughters and our children, "Let's go to the library. Let's do this." It's important that you have a broader or wider horizon in life, and that comes from reading. So you were telling us earlier that you got this passion to enter into storytelling and writing from your mother, who influenced you and made you to love reading. So, and then you faded away. So fill us in on a little more on that.
Yes, so she was a reader, a voracious reader. Um, I think that was just her naturally, that she loved books. So I also kind of followed that path. But as much as we're talking about that, a key point also came to mind, that even though whichever book we pick up to read, we also need to be very mindful the story that book we're getting out of it. Because she used to read a book. I have forgotten the title. I was in my very formative years, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And part of the book was called Lazy Bones. So yes, lazy bones. It was about, a child not being lazy, yada, yada, yada. But what I got out of it was that I was lazy. And that's the story that got stuck in my head until I came to Canada. And that is a different story. So that's what I need to share, that sometimes as children, we have very impressionable mindset. So as adults, when we are reading to our children, when we're speaking to our children, we have to be mindful of the language choices and the books that we read to them, and open the door for communication so that those thoughts and ideas don't get stuck in children's minds. Because as we get into adulthood, we carry some of these with us, and it can either make us or break us.
Mm. That's a very powerful perspective you just brought in there. It's interesting. My book to you, uh, actually saying here's an example of someone who was lazy and who don't want you to be lazy, but in your mind, you end up picking up the fact that you're lazy.
No, because
That
sometimes,
is,
as well, I'm a mother of two teenagers, so I realize that teenagers love to sleep. But within our African context, it is termed as you being tardy and lazy. But it's also part of a developmental process. But if we want a child to overcome that, do we tell the child, "You lazy, you are being lazy"? Or we look at the situation and we change the language to encourage the child? Set your alarm, do a list. At this time you do this, at this time you do this, at this time you do this. So instead of attacking the child with "you are lazy," finding ways to actually combat that. you know there is lazy and there is teenagers who love their sleep, who love to sleep. So if my teenagers are not lazy, but they need help in planning, in so that is part of what my mother didn't see. And then they were, "Oh, you are lazy, you are lazy, you are lazy." So because we've already read the book Lazy Bones, and you are being lazy as a teenager, so I merged everything together and felt like I was lazy. So even up to now in my adulthood, when I'm exhausted doing 20,000 things, I still feel like I am being lazy, because the 30,000 things I put on my list, I did not complete it. Now, that aside, that is taking us into psychology. There's a psychology in storytelling, yes. But that aside, the question you asked me, so my mother, and also there was a show on television when I was growing up in Ghana. It was a Anansi storytelling. It was hosted by a woman called Grace Omabo, which we also known as Mame Dokno. So the show was called By the Fireside. So every time it came on, at that time, not every house had television. It's coming on, you run to the next house that has the television, and all children are either sitting on the ground there, or the television is brought outside, and you go with your stool, you sit and you watch the TV. And that is where my love for storytelling and listening to story also, merged with what my mom had. I started, for instance, writing poetry because it was coded language for a full story. That is what I thought, because I kept a journal, and my mom read my journal one time, and it's like, "Is this what is going on with you?" And I decided that I'm still going to keep the journal, but I'm going to write it differently. So, for instance, when I read Politics of Old African Men, to you, it's a poem, you can decipher. But I give you the context, the story, what inspired it in full. So that is how I began, writing all these poems, but there's a full story there, and then it's compressed into this poem, and I know the full story.
oh wow, this is amazing. You're just opening up some new windows here that we need to definitely get into. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome to today's Africa on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, where we have healthy, informative, and brave conversations on topics pertaining to Africa. And today we are delighted to talk about the value of storytelling in Africa. And we have an accomplished author, and a registered nurse, and someone who also hosts a YouTube radio broadcast as well. So, Nana Yeboaa, we're glad that you are with us today. You have touched on quite a number of things, and it takes skill to be able to use language like the illustration you gave about having teenage children, and to realize there's a process, there's a stage, there's a phase in life, but we have to be positive. We have to use a positive way to extract the good things out of them, because the more we talk about negative, 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 it really puts them down and it can kill their spirits. So it takes someone like you, and maybe this is why you talked about there's a psychology in storytelling, because those are skills that sometimes we as parents, we have good intentions, but we don't have the skill to use approaches that encourage our youth, our children, our teenage children in particular, to bring out the best of them. So what would you say to parents? Tell us a little more. I'm just like, this is exciting. Tell us a little more in terms of the psychology of storytelling. I want you, because let's face it, my sister, let's face it, there are times when they are really like lazy bones, and they frustrate us. But I don't think we need to allow our frustration to go beyond the good things that we want to come out of them. So tell us a little more from that perspective.
So, for instance, you said sometimes they are lazy bones. The question is, how do we talk to them? So, if you discover that the child is not, doing what the child needs to do, I will suggest that you call that child, create a safe space. Because number one, if there is no safe space and the child will feel that they will be attacked, you're not going to get anywhere. Create a safe space, have a listening ear, and ask the child, what is going on? Share with me some of your challenges. How can I best support you? And sometimes it's just that the child needs somebody to listen. And because there's nobody listening, they are drowned in their sorrow. And they are on there doing their video game, or talking to friends, or doing something else. But we need to check in. So, but we need to do the self-education of how best to check in and learn and listen to the language of our children. Otherwise, typical African families that if I say A, you don't say nothing, you will not get anything out of that child. For me personally, I love to say, come, talk to me. How was school today? Are you facing any challenges? What are some of the challenges you're facing? Take that child out for a walk, sit at the park, do activities that open the doors for bonding, for communication, and give them a space that they are not judged. Because we love to judge like there's no tomorrow. So if I believe if you have all these laid out, your child is able to come to you and talk to you. For instance, I've had sex talks with with my children, and it comes when we are watching a movie, and it's like, okay, and it comes in. And I've had my son, who is 18, going on, tell me that he's not ready for a girlfriend until he's 21. I said, okay, that's excellent. When you're ready, you tell me, and I will buy you your first condoms. And it's like, oh, mommy. But I've had that conversation, and it
Mhm.
keeps coming up slowly in different places, in different areas. And he's comfortable enough to talk to me about that. And that is creating that safe space at home for them, not judging them. Because if we do that, if we don't do that, then we push them out for other people to influence them and to give
That's
them the information that we as parents should give to them. So it
mm,
begins with us doing the work on ourselves, unlearning all the bad teachings that we've been taught, because it's a different age and a different generation we're dealing with. So what we were taught and how we were brought up, if we apply it to this generation, is it backfires.
my sister, you're touching on some things that are very, very special and things that are very close to our hearts as Africans, especially some of us who are away from the continent in the diaspora. We have to use different methods within the places where we are to make sure that we are keeping our children on the right path. Because if we don't do the right things, someone else will come and influence them, like you said. It sounds to me uh, that storytelling isn't just about reading a book, but you're saying that this is like a way of life. You're doing life with your children. You are inviting them and listening to them and creating safe space. This is part of an educational approach that is desperately needed, and not just in the diaspora. By the way, even in Africa, a lot of things have changed in Africa. When I was growing up um, in Zimbabwe, the structures have changed. They're no longer the same. So the children growing up in Africa no longer have the kind of structures that some of us had growing up. So you're saying we need to be organic. We need to approach life from different angles and create safe spaces. And I think that's a key concept you brought.
So I'm going to touch on what you just said about the continent, and it's very important. Number one, we live in a very highly global environment with digital. So the children on the continent do not need to be looked at separately from our children here, because we're looking at human development. So when I come back to the story, what stories are we telling our children about success, about growth, about the world? How are we inputting them to dream beyond, to rewrite? But that depends on us to restructure, to unlearn and relearn different ways of being, of speaking. So anytime, say, I go to Ghana and I'm having conversations with the youth, and I love the youth because they are so inquisitive. They want to speak so much, but they don't have that listening, non-judgmental ear to say, okay, I hear you, I see you, you're thinking about this way. Okay, why don't we look at it this way?
Mhm.
What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? So it is. And so I get the youth talking to me about everything from sexual health, from their sexual health, the boys, the girls, to how to make it in life and everything. I recently was put across a call to a, a a friend put across a call to a guy, a gentleman who is in Ghana, who is a nurse who wants to travel out here to come and hustle. So the question is, if you're coming to hustle here, you're coming from a virgin forest to an overcrowded forest. You're coming from a place where you have the opportunity if you think outside the box to create massive impact so that that opportunity can bring you to this part of the world to network and bring people in. So you are at a very strategic place. The only reason that he didn't know is that he was looking outside, which is leadership. See, what we miss is looking inside for leadership, self leadership first. And when we find out what our self leadership is, and if we fall short, then you start looking for that information, learning. And the more you learn about yourself, then it opens your eyes to bigger opportunities, bigger platforms to be able to impact so that when you have the opportunity to be that leader, you are a leader who gives to people. But you cannot expect in Africa for a leader who doesn't have the vision, the mission, the direction, the values to lead you. They have not
Mm,
done their self work. So, what
mm.
story is Africa trying to tell itself?
Wow, that is powerful. That is a good question. Uh, it seems to me, among other things here, that the art of storytelling is really educational, and education is a journey. And you talked about inviting our children into safe spaces, creating safe spaces,
Mhm.
and that is amazing. I mean, I'm also seeing this even in the political arena. What kind of safe spaces are being created so that our young people learn to be analytical. And I think that's something you have brought up, that the youth are talking about all kinds of things, which is great because they're very inquisitive, and that ought to be encouraged. When I was growing up, being inquisitive wasn't encouraged. In fact, you were just supposed to be quiet and be told what to do. And if you have any ideas, you kept them to yourself, or you would talk about them among your friends, but not anyway in public. But now we know that things have changed. And so we definitely want our young people to be analytical about um, what they watch, what they read, what they wear. Why do they wear certain things? Why do they watch this? Why is school important? Why is this? Why is this? Just being analytical is something we cannot take for granted. And I think you have highlighted that very, very well. And thank you for bringing that to our attention this morning. So, when you look at Africa as a whole, my sister, and talking about the value of storytelling, what would you say if you were given an opportunity to speak to this group of men and women and young people? What are things that come to mind in terms of when it comes to storytelling, the value of storytelling? My brothers and sisters in Africa, my brothers and sisters in North America, my brothers and sisters in Europe, across the Atlantic, you know, what would you say to us?
Oh my goodness. I think we should have started right off the bat because this is long and I may not be able to finish it all, but I will try.
We will definitely invite you back.
I will try to summarize it. When we think about storytelling, we should not only think about folklore, because many times when you say you're a storyteller, many people just think, oh, you tell folklore. No, we should not only think about that. So when I think about, for instance, this program as being the value of storytelling in Africa, it is understanding that number one, our um, initial meeting with people who did not look like us, which is Caucasians. In Ghana, it was the Portuguese first. Our initial contact with them began a different aspect of our narrative, our collective story. The collective story was meeting a primitive set of people who were not cultured. The story was that we needed God, and not the gods that we worship, a different kind of God. The story was that we were not educated. We needed to be educated. But who was the one writing and telling the story of us? The story was that they came to a dark continent. We were, how do we call it? So many negations when it came. It was a negative story. And that also helped with colonization. And in colonization, the different stories that were told to us about us. And that is what we took. So if you've been told that, for instance, when you go into church and you see a white man, you've seen Jesus, so you can return home. And you've been told, or there are images, statues of a white Jesus and a black devil. Psychologically, that kind of imagery is telling you a story of where your place as a black person. So it all ties, it's like a web. The history ties into religion, into the present, into the stories we tell ourselves. And so, therefore, when we go to the negotiating table on an international level, then we're giving off the vibes that you know more than us. You have something we are looking for. Meanwhile, we have the resources that they're looking for. So, and that brings me back to the question that if we retell ourselves, we unlearn, decolonize, and tell ourselves as a great people of Africa, of all that we have, of the diasporan Africans, the milestones we are achieving, are we not capable? We are. Then, because we know that this is the story we're telling ourselves of our capabilities, how do we get there? And that's where you and I start working to bring us there, to retell the story of Africa from an African perspective. You know the reason why this Black Panther blew up so much? Because it told the story of Africa untainted, an Africa that can be, an Africa that I think Blacks everywhere, our soul and our spirit has been yearning for. And that is the power of storytelling. But it's not a one-time thing. It is stories, it is what we need to tell and retell ourselves and build and counter the negative stories about Africa that we've been so much imbued in, that colonial systems and thoughts that we've had, that we need to decolonize ourselves. So when we talk about the value of storytelling in Africa is to ensure that Africa has a step up. Africa is self-directed, and Africa is writing its story of where it needs to be, where it needs to go, and living according to those values and principles of where it's going to take it.
My sister, that is loaded. Thank you so much for taking the time to unpack that. Oh my word! I mean that is a lot, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we are dealing with being equals in this global village, and knowing that we have something to contribute, and that is not just people telling stories about us. This is now our opportunity to actually tell the stories about ourselves as who we are. And you made reference to Black Panther, and it is so true. It is so true that it was telling the story from our perspective. And there are so many good things that came out of that, just in terms of education and even the acting, in terms of who did what and the roles they played and how passionate they were. Um, yes, of course. I mean, they go through
I'm going to be
select
biased.
selection processes. Selection processes. Yes, go ahead.
Most important, the Dora Maji, the role of women
Mm-hmm.
in every aspect of it. You saw the role of women, African women, Black women, in decision making, transformational change, in safety, in security,
Yeah.
building legacy. Because without the support of these women to hold the African man would be nothing.
Mm.
So that is the value of the African woman within the African context when we are telling the African story.
You nailed it. You nailed it, my sister. You nailed it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, you know what? You are absolutely right. I mean, you remind me of what my wife stands for and what she says in terms of um, people coming together for a better Africa. We have to work together. And the women have such a significant role. And unfortunately, we have allowed the Western culture, and let me be very blunt here, we have allowed the Western culture that had a disregard for women to come and put down our values with regards to the value of women. And
Uh-huh.
when you talked about decolonization, which now we talk about decoloniality, we have to think differently. We have to look at life differently and say, I mean, when you look at Europe, I mean, I have respect for them, but that's their culture. It took them a long time for women to vote. It took them a long time for women to enter into different professions. It took them a long time for a woman to be queen. In fact, there were a number of tragedies that happened before they had the first queen. Anyway, let's leave that. They come to Africa just because that's who they are. They brought their culture with them, and they started imposing their own culture on us in such a way that the role of women, as you have pointed out in the Black Panther and everywhere else, the presence of women, which has always been part of this safety net within Africa, was taken away. And it's the same thing even in native cultures in North America, in Canada, in the US, in Latin America. There were all these changes. And when you talk about decolonization, my sister, this is why I said we have to bring you back, because you're opening a can of worms here, because we have to think differently. I'm so glad that even now we have some of our African countries who have really looked at politics from a different perspective and realized that it's important to be intentional. Who is in parliament? What
Yes.
kind of representation do we have? You know, the males, the females, the young and the old. We have to think along those lines. We can't continue to hang on to, or this is the way we've always done it. We can't continue to do that and be effective. So I'm just so delighted that we are having this conversation, and I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh my word, it's already an hour and 10 minutes. My sister, I want to give you a moment to just say if you had some parting words, things that come to mind in terms of, okay, if you forget everything else as you leave, I want to leave this with you. What would those be? And like I said, we will bring you back. That's not a threat. It's a promise.
But you see this fine African woman, you cannot threaten me, so we will not even go there. Um,
I
I
like that.
I think before I leave, there is an event in Hamilton, Ontario, 100 Hunter Street, and I'll be speaking around 3:30 to 4. So I'm getting ready to actually leave when I leave here. And that also is storytelling for empowerment. So that is what I am going to do. So anybody around the area can pass by. It's at the Rafiki Center in Hamilton. What you asked, what is something I can tell people? I believe if I can learn, have an open mind to learning. And learning doesn't have to be in the classroom. You can go to the library, pick a book of interest, develop yourselves. As Africans, what I see is that we get stuck in jobs or places and don't want to learn beyond. Create a sense of curiosity. Sense of curiosity will lead you on different paths. When you learning, it's an accumulation so that anywhere you go, when you get up to speak, you can pull all this information together. And in learning, you become a better version of yourself. So anybody listening to this, I want you to understand that nobody became somebody without learning. Learning about the environment, about the people around them, about the politics, about the economics, about something. Be able to learn and also have your network not only amongst your group as Africans, go outside because you get to know things and hear things and be in places whereby normally you wouldn't have been. Have an open mind and be non-judgmental because we tend to be very, very judgmental. Do not close the door of opportunities. Even if it's a window of opportunity and you need to peep through that window of opportunity. There is nothing wrong with that. You will learn a thing or two and it will help you.
Wow. Thank you so much, my sister. To those of you who joined us later or just joining us, I'm sorry to say that we are coming to the end of our show for today, but we're so glad and graced by our beloved sister, our beloved African sister, Nana Yaa Yeboaa, who has a passion for storytelling. Is storytelling that is a way of doing life together with others, and not just storytelling as folklore, as you mentioned earlier, but doing life together. And we are just so delighted that you have been with us And this has been very, very informative, very, very educational, and we're delighted that you have spent this time with us. You told us that you do have other things that you need to attend to, and we wish you all the best, and we will definitely have you back in terms of sharing some of the things that you have started sharing with us today. We definitely want more of that because we feel that you have a lot more to share, a lot more to give. The world needs people like you who inspire us to tell the story from our perspective and not just allow other people to tell the stories about us. You mentioned about being open-minded. Actually, I know that my wife teaches a course, or she does training with some women on it's an adult wellness group on open-mindedness, and sounds like I should be picking into that group, even though I'm not part of the ladies team, but just picking in there to learn as well, because we should be open-minded indeed. We cannot go through life without being open-minded. And so thank you so much for spending this time with us, and we look forward to having you back. And to our listeners around the world, as we have mentioned before, we broadcast in over 140 different countries around the world. Here we are, today's Africa, healthy conversations on topics pertaining to Africa. And today we were talking about the value of storytelling in Africa. And our sister did a great job. And we will be able to rebroadcast this so that you have this as part of your conversations with your young people, with your community, or within your community as well. And even as parents, it's worth looking into. Again, thank you for joining us at Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. This has been your host, Dr. Francis Mpindu, Dr. FM. Join us again every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on lovebay.com. And feel free to subscribe, to like, and to share the channel here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Thank you for being with us today. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great day, have a great afternoon, and have a great evening wherever you are. Thank you for being with us today.